do this kind of stuff. So
you're researching or working there?
I'm actually working. I'm traveling on business, and I just happen to get to go to all these amazing places. And sometimes I'll, go to see something that's here in the city or whatever. And other times, maybe I'll just do an interview because it's interesting to say that that's where I'm, recording from or something. But yeah, this is like the 7th or 8th business trip I've taken this year, and this one's actually taking me the entire way around the world. So it's kind of neat to be able to do it. All right, let me make sure I got this going here. I do, and we'll say welcome back to the show. We're speaking to Grant Cameron this morning. Actually, it's morning my time. I guess it's about 9 p.m. or so. I assume that you're in Manitoba right now. Is that right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And you grew up there? You've lived there your whole life?
Yes, I've lived there. Lived here my whole life. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm coming to you from Mumbai, India, and it's pretty good distance, I guess, pretty much opposite sides of the planet here. So yeah. Yeah, I know. It's just funny. 10 years ago, I mean, this, at least for, low level media like myself, it just wouldn't have happened. Let's get into the petitions. It's so funny to me to get to do these interviews because I write these pages and pages of notes. I get into the discussions and then I realize, it wasn't going to go in this direction. There's a lot of stuff that you said there in the first part of our interview where I wanted to jump in and make this comment or that comment. The one thing that I keep coming back to though, and it's with everybody. I exchanged emails, like I said, with a Huffington Post reporter, Stanton Friedman, Steve Bassett, Richard Dolan, and yourself, and a lot of people keep coming back to this same point about Phil Larson, and I just don't quite understand how arrogant it seems that the White House can be here, where they take a guy like that and stick him out there, and nobody knows where he got his information. Nobody knows who he spoke to. You did mention that there was a Mars connection, though, earlier. I wanted to ask you about that. Larson, had written some information about the Mars program, or what was that reference about?
2006, he worked for, I can't think of the top of my head, it's a Mars program or a Mars, some sort of Mars thing that he worked on. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what the name of this thing was. So it has this Mars background, like they're describing him as a space policy expert.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at. I mean, is that really the only sort of hook that they can hang a hat on in that case? Because it doesn't sound like there's really anything else to it, and it certainly infuriated a lot of people that there was so little to go on.
Yeah, and that was the idea of my my FOAs is just to set the record straight. What exactly did they have? What exactly were they working on? And go from there, and then maybe we've got something to work. I just looked it up here. He was part of the Mars Society's Mars Desert Research Station, 2006. And as I said, he only had a bachelor's degree. He's a writer. He's communications. So I don't think this guy knows squat about what's going on. He just basically is given a direction, and that's what I'm trying to find out. You've got a higher level than him, whether it's the science advisor sits with somebody in the executive office of the president and says, okay, we got this ugly little issue. How are we going to deal with this? And so they say, okay, let's deal with it this way. And they give it to Larson and say, write it up. And he just writes it up. I don't think he would know anything about anything in terms of UFOs. He's just the party guy. It's the old deal. I mean, if you're in a big organization, and I worked at a university, so I know how this works. I mean, if you're in a major organization, unless you want to lose your job, you just play the game the way you're told to. And in government, you have 100 different rules and 100 different pieces of paper to fill out, and it's so bureaucratic and so organized that everybody just does what they're told. It's the old deal about if you were at Auschwitz, like how did all these people end up putting people in the gas chamber? Because they were just doing what they were told. That's how it works. You people just they go along with it, and they think it's the thing to do. And I don't think Larson questioned at any point.
Oh, I'm sure he didn't. Right.
Try to figure it out. That was just his job to write it up. I'm trying to figure out who gave him the direction, because it would have been at a different level. Somebody else made the decision, and he was just the guy that wrote the thing up. So, but it does have this interesting Mars connection. I'm there. It's same thing. I mean, if you're a Mars guy and you've got this connection, you and the administration are not going to sort of expose NASA as being like a total make work project and say, you know, yeah, we should look for aliens here on Earth and then try to convince the public to spend, you know, billions of dollars to go on these other missions. So it to me the FOIA is just to figure out what the whole deal was about with Larson and where it came from, because that's the key, is to figure out what was the real response, and especially if I can clarify this one that Obama didn't see the petition, that he was never contacted.
Yeah.
Then I think we've got a story that you know that's worth talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree with that point. That's a very interesting point, and you know, unfortunately, we both know you're probably not going to get an answer anytime soon. But whenever you do get the answer, yeah, I mean, if you got the answer right away and it turned out that he had never been contacted, I mean, yeah, you would think that would hit the media pretty quickly. But there would have to be, you know, some controversy surrounding that. Let me ask you another question. I haven't gotten to put this to anybody, so I'll congratulate you that you're the first that I've been able to pull this out on in an interview. I want to talk for just a quick second about the president and whatever clearance level that person probably has, because it occurred to me at some point that with my sort of loose understanding of how security clearances actually work, that, you know, I just don't think it works the way that people think it does, and that the president just automatically, once he gets into office, gets the, for lack of a better description, the highest possible clearance. I mean, if you look back at George W. Bush, there were allegations that he was a cocaine user or had maybe, you know, not, I mean, I don't know. They were just rumors. Maybe he just, you know, stumbled across it at a party once, but that's really not the point. And then Clinton, of course, his famous I didn't inhale quote about whether he had ever smoked marijuana or something like that. You know, these people are not going to get through a polygraph and be granted an SCI type clearance. I'm wondering if you know anything about that, or what clearance level anybody you know, had. And obviously the point that I'm getting at is, if they don't have a high clearance level, they're not going to be told certain things. It's just automatically going to work that way.
Okay, that's kind of that's a long subject. I would say it needs, if you talk to John Alexander, he'll say, you know, the president knows everything, he's in control, and
yeah, he's the one I want to ask this question to. Yeah, sorry, that's exactly who I want to ask this question to, is John Alexander. I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's how I came up with the question.
Yeah, he will say. I would say that it's on a need to know basis, that the president. If you take a look at the president's schedule, you'll see that the president comes in. For example, you mentioned Bush. Bush was a governor. Reagan was a governor. I mean, what do these guys know about anything? They know absolutely diddly squat about anything.
Sure.
So they come in and they have to brief the president. They'll go into national security, the first briefing, which takes place when they're president-elect. And they've got to basically bring them up to speed on, you know, what foreign leaders we've assassinated, where we're bombing, you know, what all the, you know, the ugly issues are. And but in terms of need to know, is the president, if you take a look at his schedule, is so busy and is doing so many things, he hasn't got time to read anything. I mean, I can't remember how many pages a day it was, but it's an incredible number of pages. The president is like a photo op, and then phone to get this bill through, and phone these people, and he's basically, every minute of his day is scheduled. He hasn't got time to sit there and read about different stuff. So I think with the UFO aspect is, he really doesn't need to know about it. If something were to happen, then they would call him in and say, Mr. President, something's happened here. Sit down. We have to brief you. And then they'll tell him what's going on. But until then, there's a million subjects in the U.S. government that are happening at any one time, and people that think that he knows everything about everything are totally delusional, because he really knows nothing about anything. He only knows what he's being told. Now, there may be incidents when they are not told certain things. For example, the famous story about Truman not being told about the atomic bomb when he was the vice president. And it wasn't until 12 days after he became president, they decided, Stimson says, okay, we have to tell you, sit down, Mr. President, we have to tell you about this bomb. So they tell him that. If you take a look at some of the stories, and this is a story you might ask Steve Bassett, because Steve, this is a story I had, and I tried to get to Sarah McClendon, and Steve said, well, maybe you shouldn't talk to her, she's not very well, whatever, and I always regret that I didn't talk to her. But Sarah McClendon, according to Stephen Greer, had said to President Clinton, why don't you do what these people, and she was referring to Stephen Greer, why don't you do what these people are asking? Why don't you do something about this UFO situation? And according to Sarah McClendon, Bill Clinton leaned over and said, Sarah, there's a government inside the government, and I don't control them. And that's this whole idea about the government behind the government. And if you see, when Bill was in a lot of trouble, Hillary was on the was on the talk show circuit, and she was talking about the right-wing conspiracy that was trying to get rid of her president, or her husband. So there is this idea, even inside a government, according to Shirley MacLaine, that Jimmy Carter was said, you don't have a need to know. Or the people that I think, if you ever have a chance to interview, are the people that I think would know better than anybody how much they can say. And the one would be Ron Pandolfi, who's with the National Intelligence Office, who I think would know better than anybody how all the pieces are put together, whether it's anything that we know or anything, but he would know what the real story is. And Kit Green. Now, Kit Green ran the Weird Desk at the CIA before Ronald Pandolfi was there, from 69, I think, to 83. And he says that he sat with 3 presidents, and that every president asked him about UFOs. And Kit Green's words were, I really didn't say anything because apparently they're not cleared to know. That's Kit Green, who was the guy that would know. And Kit Green's not a wacko type guy. He's a pretty level-headed guy. You would sort of believe anything he says. Now, when he said that, so to me, I take that as John Alexander, who's just a colonel in the Army, which is really nothing. I mean, what does he know? I mean, Kit Green is a guy who sat with the president, and John Alexander will agree, because I had the question put on one radio talk show, he has not talked to a president. He's talked to heads of intelligence agencies and stuff like that, but he's never talked to the president. Kit Green has sat with 3 presidents, and the discussion of UFOs has come up in 3 different meetings with presidents, and he says apparently they're not cleared to know. I think that, to me, would be my stance, that if Kit Green says the president is not cleared to know, then the president isn't cleared to know. Now, there may be some issues about, technology, that we've got this development or whatever. As to SCI clearance, I think the president does have an SCI clearance, because what my experience is with the president is that once the president becomes president, they clean his past. Because every president's going to have something in his past that they don't want. And they go back and, like Obama's record, they'll make that all disappear, and the birth certificate and stuff like that. Because the idea is to protect the president. You're protecting the office of the president. And you've got to protect that guy, because if something like that comes out, the president falls, the office falls. So in terms of that, and you take Obama, one example for sure that had SCI clearance was the assassination of
Bin Laden,
which would have been an SCI. So they call him in and they say, Mr. President, we got this compound in and we think he's there, and they present the evidence. And then when it comes time to do the attack, then they say, okay, Mr. President, here, this is the group that's going to be used, and they have to explain what the SEALs are, and they have to explain what the stealth helicopter's like, and this is what we're going to use, and they brief him on that. But until then, he didn't know, what all these different agencies were, how they did it, or whatever.
Right.
And they tell him only what he needs to know, and maybe because to protect him, especially with the UFO issue, the plausible deniability, but also because the president hasn't got time to read anything. He hasn't got time to know about all this stuff. He only has time to know because he's getting a briefing today on Europe falling apart tomorrow. And so we got to sit down. We got to talk about Europe. Yeah. And if you take a poll, they're looking at polls he's being reelected now, so he's got to look at polls, and he realizes, for example, that Pennsylvania, he's going to lose Pennsylvania unless he goes. So now they're giving him briefings on Pennsylvania and the polls and stuff like this, and he realizes that unless he gets Pennsylvania and swings Pennsylvania, he's going to lose the next election. That's where his mind is at. It's not at, what kind of aliens are here or anything like that. He's really, it's getting reelected. It's trying to run the thing, and you've got unemployment problems and the debt, and those things just consume his entire day. Plus, like, I was just amazed when you see Jimmy Carter up before 6 o'clock